Hi everyone, welcome. Lovely to have you all here. And this is the third in our series of Meeting of Minds, sharing a knowledge and passion through these trainings. And we're absolutely delighted to have Alina here. And I'll say a little bit more about her in a minute. She will be looking at the transformation potential of the Palace of Possibilities work to help clients overcome their limiting beliefs. The way this will go is that we will have Elena speaking for about 30 minutes. Then we're going to book you in breakout rooms, and we have a question from Alina, which we'll ask you to answer. And then there'll be about 15, 20 minutes or so for questions and answers. So Alina is an EFT Master Trainer of Trainers. She's been training and mentoring practitioners since 2006. She's co-founded the EFT Tapping Training Institute, where she's trained thousands of practitioners globally. And she is a prolific writer, absolutely 9 books on EFT tapping and addressing root causes of emotional distress to achieve lasting well-being, and looking at trauma, stress, and emotional healing. Her passion for empowering others on their healing journey continues to inspire and transform lives around the world. And I can also tell you that she enjoys crabbing, clamming, fishing, and berry picking. And she's consistently rated as one of the top EFT practitioners. So, Alina, we're absolutely delighted to have you here, and thank you so much, and really looking forward to your session. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Ralph. And thank you to EFT International, yes, because this program is so wonderful and just an added benefit of being part of the organization. So I am here to talk about beliefs, and I think that this is very important work. I think at this point, where more and more people are really challenging their belief systems, I think that there is nothing better to help clients with than transforming their beliefs. I think that people are challenging their limiting beliefs as they relate to culture and society and spirituality and health more than ever, and I'm really all for it. So let's talk about the Palace of Possibilities, because when I trained with Gary Craig back in the day, that was the metaphor that was used for looking at how we're born into a palace of possibilities, and all of these rooms in the palace are filled with more wonderful experiences and life-affirming people and things, and everything from careers to wealth to relationships. And what keeps us stuck is the idea that people write on our walls, and we look at those walls that are full of the limiting beliefs that they put on those walls: society, culture, our parents, religious leaders, teachers and people, siblings, family members. They write on our walls and then they limit us. And so we consult the writing on the wall before we actually make a decision about moving forward or making a change. Now, we've come to update that. It's always good to think about our beliefs and our cultural sensitivity. And what we have found is that we give the Palace of Possibilities in historical context, because it's used so much that when they're out there in the EFT world, they hear Palace of Possibilities and they know what it means. But we've come to shift this in our trainings to be a more useful metaphor, because the truth is the Palace of Possibilities metaphor really doesn't account for privilege. And so not everyone is born into a palace of possibilities, let's be real. And so I prefer the idea of having a garden where we can nurture that garden. Who helps us nurture that garden? The people in our lives. And, if it's in soil that is unhealthy, like I'm a gardener, we compost the soil. That's where it all starts, is the soil. And adequate sunshine and adequate rain and water and love and care really helps your garden to flourish. And if you start off with poor soils, you don't pay attention to weeding, you don't pay attention to the water, then it'll really just kind of be a mess. So we prefer this, and I think it's useful to update things like this when we talk to other people about EFT and the work on beliefs. So come up with your own metaphor. So let's talk a minute about how beliefs are formed. And so we know that beliefs are formed really through childhood events and experiences. If you were constantly, like I was talking about that flourishing of that garden or not, if we had those parents and caregivers in early childhood where we were rejected or we felt unsafe, then we could start experiencing limiting beliefs that play out over time. And so things like I'm not good enough or the world isn't safe are common with people that have not had or have just had a few. It just takes one of these childhood experiences then to form a belief system. And so emotional events are also like, even if they weren't really happening in childhood, but later on, emotional experiences, intense emotional experiences, emotional memories where beliefs are formed. And then last but not least is the idea of social conditioning. So society, media constantly send out messages of being worthy, of being successful, power dynamics, beauty, all of those things which can help us they really can limit how we view ourselves and the world and other people. And so a classic example of this last one, because, really the power of EFT is when we look at specific events and we can see the first two, there are events there. Not so clear with social conditioning. And one of the examples that I like to share about how this happens is, I'm sure many of you have worked with phobias before with clients or in yourself, where the only event was a mother's reaction, a caregiver's reaction to seeing a mouse. And then that you experienced that and you made the unconscious decision that mice are something to be feared. And so that's a good example of how, even with social conditioning, we can always find events that we can work through as EFT practitioners. So we always find events. And so you might think, oh yeah, no, I don't know where this comes from. I'm going to give you some hints towards the end of this talk about how to flush those out. But imagine that you are, you're walking down the street one day and a stranger, a woman shows up and comes up to you screaming and yelling and saying, your purple hair is disgusting. And so you don't have purple hair and you think about what's happening, and it could go one of two ways. It could go to being an interesting story that you share with your friends that night at a dinner party. Like, you won't believe what happened to me. I was walking downtown and this woman, poor woman, she's having a psychotic break. You brush it off. It makes for a story. Okay, done and over. Now experience the same scenario where you have had a parent who criticized you, who talked about your appearance, who maybe abused you with knots, untangling your hair, was really, really rough with you, and that created a traumatic experience for you and set you up to feel more deeply when someone comes up to you and apparently, like, you don't have purple hair, you don't believe that, but because of those neural networks that were formed early on, you still come away with this feeling of, yeah, there's something wrong with me. I'm a terrible person. You feel dysregulated for the rest of the day or even weeks on end. So that's how this works. Even when we think like, no, there's nothing in my past that made me feel this way, we can always find something. All right. So yeah, this happens below conscious awareness, right? This happens on a subconscious level. And here, good metaphor for that is the idea of we're only seeing the top of that iceberg where there's this massive structure below it. And that's really what drives us. And so we need to know that when our clients aren't really going to realize that these are happening. Sure, we're gonna have occasionally the client that comes in and says something like, I really want to find my soulmate, and that is my presenting issue. And a recent example of me challenged with this is that I'm having a really hard time dating. I'm constantly getting rejected. And the recent events that you can work on first are, break up with a girlfriend, or I was dating someone and I wanted to take it more seriously and they rejected me. And oh, by the way, I feel like I'm not, the core belief under all of this is that that I'm easily rejected, that I'm unlovable, that I'm not important. And I know exactly where this comes from. At age 6, when I was in kindergarten, my mother forgot to pick me up one day after school. Like, very few people are going to come to you with all this information, so it's yours to unpack and unravel. And luckily, we have a system with EFT that really helps us to bring that forth and to flush it out. That's not to say that you won't get any of those people, because many of our clients, by the time they try EFT, are very self-aware, right? They really understand themselves, their personalities, their traumas, and the things that set these things up. So, how does this happen? Well, when we're born, so even before, when we're in the womb, we're picking up on all the sensory information, right? We're reading the room, we're feeling the vibes from 0 to about 6 years old. And so we are learning about the world without any filters. And so we're absorbing that from our environments. And, we don't have any filters that can tell us, mom is just having a bad day. Don't take the nasty look that she gave you about creating a mud pie in the garden seriously. She actually wants you to be creative and explore and be adventurous, but she's just having a bad day now. So don't put that into your memory bank, right? That doesn't happen. It helps us to not keep repeating things by learning through associative memory and really learning to make sense of the world, to generalize, to globalize with the things that happen early on, 0 to 6. We're in a hypnagogic state. So we're primarily in theta and delta wave brain states, which just allows us to absorb everything like a sponge. But unfortunately, if we don't address those, if we don't look at them, if we don't examine them, then we're really kind of repeating the pattern throughout our lives in different flavors and forms. There are many schools of thought out there that ascribe to the notion that we have one belief, one limiting belief that kind of informs us throughout our lives. So if you think of astrology, if you think of human design, if you think of Enneagram, if you think of matrix reimprinting, they're sort of like we have this one core wound or wounds that set up our personality type and how we view the world. And so we are using that to before we make any decisions, and we really respond from that core place. And so in matrix reimprinting, we actually feel that that there's no getting rid of that core wound in that belief for good, what'll happen is more like Carl Jung said, which is you're going to be in a much different place with all the work that you do on yourself. You're going up that healing spiral, and you're going to be in a very different place than you were the last time you were floored with it. A good experience is to think back at how you were before you started doing any personal work. So think of how you were in your 20s, and now with EFT and all the useful tools that we have, how that experience is different. You see it as, oh, you again, right? You limiting belief again. You're showing up for me to work through, to gain wisdom from. So a good way to think about it is that grit or piece of sand in the oyster that then can cultivate the pearl. There's more learning to do. And so that's a better way to look at it, like one and done, I'm through, I've addressed that belief. It shouldn't show up anymore in my life. And because that's just not the way things work. And we don't want to create false hope for our clients. So this is a handout that we use in our trainings and with our mentees, and you can use it, you can create your own, and basically it's this idea of approaching this in a sort of trauma-informed way, so that we are looking at the more recent events first. Like I said, we're going to look at the presenting issue, which is I'm having problems dating, I'm having problems talking to my boss, I'm challenged with my husband. That's the tabletop, and the experiences that we work on are the legs. The sides of the legs then become the different aspects of the events, and then the underneath it could be a bigger tabletop that is. So presenting issue, I'm having challenges, dating. And then underneath it is I'm easily rejected or I'm unlovable. And that's when a trauma-informed approach is to address the presenting issue, recent events and conclusions, work on making enough of a difference in the presenting issue for you then to gain trust, rapport, and connection with your client in order then to go looking for those beliefs underneath it, the core beliefs, the ones like I'm not lovable. So what's amazing about EFT is you work on those recent events and the pathways will become clear they'll just pop up. People, all of you know how wonderful it is, and you have to take precautions because you know that at any point in time, a person can say, oh, I'm remembering something that happened 30 years ago that I haven't thought of since, or 40 years ago, or I experienced a big trauma and I didn't see how this was connected. So you have to know when it's appropriate to go there, and we use a smarter goal setting model. So smarter goal, small, measurable, achievable, relevant to the bigger picture, time bound, meaning I'm going to achieve this goal in 3, 4, 5, 6 sessions. And then when you have done enough work and you're seeing and your client is confirming that you've reached that first goal, then you can evaluate and then readjust. And that's when you can go deeper with a client by saying, I've heard you mention many times that you feel you're not lovable. And do you feel that this is connected to what we've been working on? And you've made such great progress that I was wondering, do you feel comfortable going to some of the earlier origins of this? How would you feel about going to the earlier origins of this so that it doesn't keep repeating itself so much in your life? Because many times those core beliefs end up showing not only in relationship, but at work relationships, in your ability to make money, success, take care of yourself health-wise. So that's an invitation for clients to go deeper with you, and they can always just say, no. They can say, no, I've done good work and I'm happy with where we are, and I can pause what we're doing. Thank you very much, right? Always the client's prerogative. This is client-driven work. Okay, so how do we go about the process of doing this and this work with beliefs, other than just making sure that you work through recent and address the client's presenting issues before you go much further. So one of the ways that you can track this is not necessarily SUDS on the belief, like I am not lovable, because SUDS really is talking about how the units of distress of a specific event. But overall, how do you track how you're doing with the progress that you're making with a belief is through validity of cognition. So many of you know this term, but it's not universal in the EFT world. So validity of cognition, 0 to 100% true when you say it. 0 to 100% true. Then you're using EFT on the specific events that are part of that table, the table legs of that table. And then as you do that, you're going to get others, and you're going to perhaps daisy chain and things like that towards all of those events that come up around this. And when you address enough of that, like I said, and you're reaching your first goals, then the invitation is to go to deeper. Where do you think this might have started? And that sort of thing. You are going to work on several events, at least one big event, likely, in order for you to go back and then recheck and test the validity of cognition. So 0 to 100% true as I feel it. And I tell my clients, you know, it's not, you've done so much work that part of you is saying, no, I don't believe that anymore. But there's like this little bit of, internal like struggle, like, oh, I wonder if that's still true. Give that a number, 0 to 100% true. As you say it, that's the VOC. We'll come back and check it. So I don't check the VOC again until I've done maybe another 2 sessions or 3 sessions, or I've done significant work on events that created that belief system. So you are going to, you can use different variations of EFT, the different techniques to actually uncover what those events are. One really good way of approaching this is looking at chasing the pain. Right? So you ask the client to tune into their body. And when they say, I'm not lovable, where does it show up in my body? And then you can work on the sensations of the body with the intention of uncovering a specific event. Right? The other way that you can do this is by sneaking up. And that is when you say, even though I don't know what this is about, I wonder if some part of me does know. Even though I don't know what led me to think that I'm not lovable, I wonder if some part of me already knows, right? When you ask that kind of question and you're tapping through the points, I wonder what that's about. I wonder if some part of me knows. Yeah, I think some part of me knows. I'm ready to see what this is about. What's behind all of this? Where might it have come from? I wonder. When you ask those kinds of questions with tapping, the brain starts to look for the answer. And oftentimes you'll be able to do that. So that is the process in a nutshell. The other way that you can do this is simply by tapping and tuning in. So what's really fascinating that I think we know as practitioners, like intuitively, that this makes sense, but I don't see it said very often. And that is the idea that tapping not only clears and neutralizes and really resolves events and issues and beliefs, but it also tunes us in, right? It also brings us insight, makes us really make connections. So if I'm observing a practitioner working with someone and I see them talking a lot and not getting anywhere, and this goes for you, like if you ever feel really stuck and like, what am I doing next? What is happening here? I'm stuck. find a way to get tapping. Even if it sounds global at first, even if you haven't really nailed a specific event, you can do some kind of global tapping just to get started, even chasing the pain just to get started, sneaking up just to get started, because then the brain is going to really get involved and start pointing the direction, making sense of those things, and allowing you to, see these things, and bringing them up to the surface for the client. So I thought that we would do some tapping now to tune us in. So tuning in tapping does not start with any kind of setup statement or anything like that, because we're using the tapping to bring us information. We do this with tapping on tail enders, affirmations. Let's see what's left. Let's listen to that inner dialogue. So what I want you to do now is you're going to tap along, and I'm going to ask you to repeat these statements. And when you hear one that resonates, that's like, oh, it gotcha. Write that down, because we know that there's some power there. There are ways to track this back to something else. Something else that I wanted to say before we get started tapping. Okay, here's a situation that's pretty common. You're working with a client. You're working on let's say the client that I mentioned earlier, and that particular client came in and said, listen, let me tell you what happened this week. I couldn't talk to my boss, and it was a big blow up, and I really feel rattled by it, and I want to work on that. Now, you've already set up some goals with the client about dating and, let's say, his inability to, change his profile on some dating app. And you can say to the client, okay, so then what you're asking me to do is take a pause on what we're working towards with our goals. And you want me to work on what's happening here with your boss. I just want to make sure that we're actually going to have time to go back to that. I can give you suggestions on how to tap on that on your own. We can put it towards the end, or we can work on it now. It's your choice, and they could say, yeah, okay, or no, let's keep going with what we were doing before. I want to meet that goal. But the other thing that's really cool is you can ask them, how are those two things connected? And then you're going to get the belief. You're going to hear that belief, right? And then you can, because you're working on it, and it's going to be relevant to the success of the presenting issue and something deeper to the core, then go for it. Okay, so let's tap, right? Okay, so I want you to repeat, I'm not good enough. I'm unlovable. I'm not safe. Let's throw in, the world isn't safe. I don't belong. I'm too much. I'm not enough. I must be perfect to be accepted. Success is bad. If I speak my truth, I will be rejected. Change is dangerous. I can't trust myself. Or I can't trust other people. Okay, so what did you feel? Did you feel a little, I might have some of that? These are like the most common, but there might be some others that popped up for you. Write those down. Just going to give you a client story and how interesting the brain works, and how current things are related to past events, and especially when we form these beliefs. I had a client who was working on her inability to speak up, and it really affected so many things in her life, including a work relationship. So the first goal was to be able to feel comfortable addressing a problem with a coworker. So we worked on that. We worked on past times where my client was unable to speak up and felt paralyzed by bringing things up to people in her life. So not only coworkers, this also generalized into other areas of her life. And then when we finally, like session number 3 or 4, when we finally started to going into the origins of the problem, what came up was when she was after her first week of kindergarten. So it was week 2 of kindergarten, and they had a substitute bus driver, and the bus driver passed her stop. The substitute bus driver passed her stop. She gets up from her seat, goes up to the bus driver and says, "You just passed my stop." The bus driver puts it in reverse and crashes into a car that he didn't see. Now, no one was injured, but what was set up then was the belief that if I speak up, something dangerous is going to happen, right? You got to love this work. You really got to love this work. So now I'm going to hand it back over to Ralph so that he can present some material for you to have a breakout with.
Thank you so much, Alina. Thank you, everyone. That was absolutely wonderful. So what I'm going to ask you to do is move into breakout groups. And there's a question that Alina has set. So we're going to ask you to work in breakout groups of 3 people. What we'd like you to do for 10 minutes, what we'd like you to do, obviously, is to introduce yourselves, your name and where in the world you are. And we'd like one of you to type the key ideas per question into the document on their computer. And if you could, paste the answers into the chat box. And then the key question that we would like you to address and discuss how your limiting beliefs from the exercise has played out over time, or share a client story, as you've heard. So we'll give you 10 minutes. You will have a 1-minute warning when to come back, and it's pretty brutal and pretty quick. So look forward to hearing from you in 10 minutes. Many thanks indeed. Welcome back, everyone. Apologies for the technical issues, but all sorted. Hope you had a good discussion. If you do have questions for Alina, do start putting them into the chat, please, and then she can respond. But some absolutely great comments from you all.
Mm-hmm. Success is bad is a big one, especially for practitioners, for sure.
There you go. Some good questions already. Wow.
Okay. All right. The question is, how do you sneak up on I'm not enough angle when the client doesn't associate their overwork with their limiting belief? So, I think that we kind of rob clients from the experience of self-discovery and empowering them when we jump in and say, "Oh, do you think this has to do with overwork?" So, in your discovery session or your consultation, your initial, like, really looking at the bigger picture, it's great to the client comes with their presenting issue, but go ahead and ask, do you think there's some underlying belief about all this? And, oh, okay, I see. And how do you think that plays out? And do you have any sense of maybe the origins of this? Sometimes it's a mother or father. Typically that's where it starts. Where did it start for you? And then don't open up that box, because in a discovery session or a consult, we're really not doing a deep dive. We're just getting an overview. And so I think in the process, clients will be able to, if they keep coming up with the problem of, wow, I just had a terrible day. I said yes to everything. I'm overworking. I'm doing too much, I'm heading towards burnout, then you can invite the question of, so we've been working on this other thing, which is I'm not enough. Do you think that this plays into that? Is that connected? Right? That's a good way to connect it. What other techniques can be used to remove limiting beliefs? Events, going back to my mentor, teacher, trainer, Gary Craig, who always said the proof of this work, the best approach for this work is to find specific events. In order to be terrific, you have to be specific. If I speak my truth, it's not safe. Working on this issue. Great. More great reflections. I hope you all get to see these in the chat. The awareness is easy. What next? Yeah. Do some tapping. And you know, I will say that often it is easier to uncover these when working with a practitioner or a good swap partner. Really, sometimes it's just hard to see the forest for the trees, and you need someone there. I almost feel like your psyche won't allow you to see these things unless it feels safe. So that's something to remember with working with clients. Unless the psyche is safe, it's not going to present what really this is connected to. And so building that trust and rapport and connection is important. But sometimes it just takes another person to reflect something that you've said that you weren't aware of, that you were saying, and boom, then you can make that connection. So sometimes it's easier. I know for me at this point, I always tap with my husband, Craig. He's my tap partner. And because the things that just show up now are so hidden from myself that it's best for me to work with him. Do you see limiting beliefs linking with parts work? Absolutely. The part that's the limiting belief, yes, and it always comes down to events. That part was formed as a part of an experience and being able to deal with an event. And so we always want to look for those events. Yeah. Good questions.
Very good questions and very good comments. Thank you so much, Alina, and thank you, everyone. I'm sure you, as I did, got an enormous value from listening in that presentation. Could you put any appreciation you have for Alina in the chat, please?
Oh, thank you.
Just what did you get from listening to her, and what did you get? So any comments, please, or gratitude's appreciation would be very welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for all the love. And I'm glad you liked the metaphor of the garden. Great. Thank you, Ralph and Andy and all the people at EFT International making these possible. It's a really valuable resource.
It's lovely, isn't it?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Well, I'm reluctant to stop them, but let me just thank you again, Alina. That was absolutely amazing. And the next Meeting of Minds session will be May the 19th, Naomi Jansen on Boxing Up. And it's at 10 a.m. UK time. So that's May the 19th, 10 a.m. UK time, Naomi Jansen on Boxing Up. And thank you all, and have a good rest of the day or evening or morning or wherever you are.